Hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Olive Tree with me, Julia Fisher, bringing you the stories of believers in Jesus living in Israel and the West Bank. Sandy and Oded Shoshani live in Jerusalem. They have 7 children. Oded is a pastor and Sandy is the national director of a pro-life organisation in Israel called Be-Ad Chaim. Here she is in conversation with Ann Pawson.
Be-Ad Chaim is a non-profit Israeli organization that started in 1988. I didn't start it. I was raising my 7 kids then. But some believers, Christians, and Messianic Jews together decided they had to do something about the horrific abortion statistics. We've had probably since 1948, probably about 2 million abortions in Israel. At the present, the government statistic is 1 out of 10 pregnancies is aborted, but I would say it's more like probably 1 out of every 6 pregnancies is an abortion. And we're actually, Be-Ad Chaim is doing something very exciting. Next week, finally, after months of preparation, a national survey on abortion is coming out that we're doing because we want to know the real numbers. And we feel that if the public really knew what was happening with abortion here, we could change public opinion, and that's our goal. To see abortion stopped, to see abortion become an issue in Israel. And Be-Ad Chaim is trying to be in the forefront of doing something about abortion, to stop it.
You see so many young girls and even some older mothers of various races and religions. Could you tell us about some of their stories?
This is something really exciting. I'm glad you said that various is a good number because we love everybody. Every person has been created in the image of God. They are precious in His sight. There are other Orthodox Jewish organizations that help women who are pregnant, but they help only women with Jewish mothers. And we really feel that God would have us help every human being in distress. And so we love everybody. We have, whether she's a Jewish woman with a Eastern background or a Russian immigrant or an Ethiopian immigrant, or maybe she's a foreign worker from the Philippines. Maybe she's an Arab woman. It's of no consequence to us. These are people who deserve dignity and value. Yesterday, there was a woman here who was a refugee from Ethiopia. And she said she's the mother of, she just gave birth to her 5th child. A newborn baby was in her arms. A 3-week-old baby was in her arms. And she said, when I was pregnant, I went to my social worker. And I said, I'm going to need some help. I'm going to need some financial assistance. I'm single. I have no income. And she said, I just can't do anything right now. What am I going to do? And the social worker looked at her and as though she was telling her, go buy a loaf of bread. She said, well, just abort. It's such a simple solution. Just go abort. And I asked this woman, I said, why did you not abort? I mean, of course, I can say what I would say, but I wanted to hear her. I said, why did you not abort? And she said, because God didn't want me to do that. Now, she had aborted twice in the past because various men had pushed her into aborting, but she deeply grieved that. That was not her first choice to do that. And the woman who brought her was a really beautiful Ethiopian believer whom we had helped. Her child is now 6. And this woman, I said, so where'd you meet? She said, I met her on a bus. And I started visiting her because I saw that she was so desperate for help. And I would go to her home and I would encourage her. And I've been telling her about the love of God for her. And she said, and when I found out that she was in such despair about this pregnancy and this new baby coming, I had to bring her to you. And, I remembered something years ago. 2 also very poor Ethiopian moms had come in, and one was a new believer and one was not yet a believer. And I had said to the believer, why do you care about the baby in that other lady's womb? What do you care? Okay, I know, but I wanted to hear it from her mouth. And she said to me, her baby could be a king. And so I said to the woman yesterday in the chair with this 3-week-old little girl, I said, your daughter, she could be anything in the world. She could be the Prime Minister of Israel. She could be anything. Why do we limit ourselves? Why do we put so little value on children? You might say, well, this woman, she's poor and she's single and, her child's going to have a bad life. Who determined that piece of garbage? Every child could be a king. Every child has every potential. I remember the story of Beethoven. You can look it up on the internet. They have this interesting story about Beethoven. maybe you saw it, Ann, but
Well, tell us.
his mother had multiple children, and I think there was like a disease going around when she was pregnant with him. I can't remember the whole story, but basically she should have aborted him, And there he was, born Beethoven. And look what God did with him. The music and the beauty that came out of his life. And so many. I remember there's a famous American football player now, Tim, and his mother was told that he would be handicapped and she should abort. And she was a Christian woman, and she said, there's no way I'm going to abort. And he turned out to be one of the, Heisman Trophy, one of the best football players in America, godly guy who serves the Lord. And I mean, yesterday, I was in the hospital visiting one of my favorite mamas with her little boy. I'll tell you her story. When she was 16, her name is Miriam. She lets me tell her story because she's a woman of faith. And when she was 16, she came into the office. One of her sisters brought her. Miriam had left her family when she was 13. She grew up in an ultra-Orthodox neighborhood. And because she was dark-skinned, what will I say? She was an Eastern Jew. Her dad was a Western Jew from Russia. We call that Western, like with a white skin. And her mom was a Yemenite Jew with dark skin. And so she was pretty much persecuted in her neighborhood. The kids teased her and the teachers treated her badly. And she had a lot of trouble. And she said to herself as a child, she said, I don't understand how they can represent God and be so prejudiced and hateful. How could that be God's way? God couldn't be like that. And she would tell herself, there must be a different God than what they're teaching me about. And when she was 13, as I said, she left home and she was on the streets. When she was 16, she became pregnant. And she was pregnant by an African guy. So she went to the Orthodox organization that helps women who are pregnant. And they told her, just abort because your partner is not Jewish. You don't need to keep this baby. The baby won't be, well, I don't even want to say it. Anyway, then her sisters brought her to me. I would say us, but they brought her to me because she was so young. She was 16, that I just was so happy to see this sweet little girl, basically a little pregnant girl. And I told her about Yeshua, about Jesus. She decided to keep her baby. And she started coming to our monthly mothers' meetings. She heard about God's forgiveness and love. And the penny dropped. I had told her a little bit. When we share the gospel with people, we share a little bit. Yeah. We're like a seed, and somebody else shares more, and somebody else shares more. God causes the water and the growth, and this one does this, and this one does that. And finally, it's kind of like that seed takes root, and they come to real depth of their lives in Yeshua. I really believe that. I've seen that over and over. I can share, someone else will share, someone else will disciple. It's the work of God. So Miriam came to faith, had her little boy Oshar, which means happiness, and she moved down to the south of Israel with a different African partner, but he really is Oshar's dad. I mean, he's a great guy. He became his dad. And for several years, they lived down there, and then I see a note on my desk, Miriam is back in Jerusalem. So I phoned her, I say, why? She said, I want to grow in my faith. So she's with her partner, and my husband and I invited them to dinner a few times, and would you like to get married now? He didn't want to get married. He'd been married twice. He said, I don't need that. And we thought we just leave it to the Holy Spirit. Yes. It's up to the Holy Spirit, not us. And she started coming to a little discipleship group that we began in the office here for the women who'd come to faith. And she was really growing in her faith, like really growing deep. Her roots were going very deep. And every week she'd go home and tell her husband, her partner then, about what we were studying, and they were growing. And after a while she came to me and she said, Sandy, I really want to be baptized. It's time. I love the Lord, and my partner wants to be baptized. So this time we decided to go to their house because it was their turf, And so we said to them, they said, we want to be baptized. And we said, well, what do you think? My husband said, what do you think about maybe the right order might be to get married? And they said, no, we can't get married. Why can't you get married? Because he can't leave the country for various visa reasons, and we can't afford a wedding. And so we just looked at them and said, you know what? We'll marry you in the community, in our congregation. Just get married. Oded will bless you. My husband, the pastor, will bless you. And you'll do your vows under the Lord, and you'll be married. And that's what happened. So they got married, and she was 8 months pregnant with twins when they got married. I love it. We announced it in the congregation. She had a big belly. Yeah. My granddaughter said, how is it they just got married with that belly? And you know what I told her? I said, sweetie, people make mistakes, and God forgives and loves us and lets us turn around our lives, So anyway, they were married, and they had these little beautiful twin boys. And one of the boys were, I don't know if anybody's listening as a nurse, but they were mono twins. That means that there was no membrane between the boys, sharing in the same womb, and obviously, but no membrane between, and their cords could have become entangled. So doctors told them, you need to abort at least one or both will die. So you have to choose. You have to abort one so that they'll both live. One would live. In other words, one would live. And Miriam refused. And then they found out that one of the boys had a cleft lip, and they thought it was a cleft palate. And they told her it's probably an indication of more damage, and you should abort. He's going to have a cleft palate, and he's going to be handicapped, and it could indicate brain damage, and you have to abort. And the doctors pushed. She was telling me yesterday, she was looking at the medical reports, that doctors pushed for abortion, and she refused. So the boys were born in the summer a couple of months ago, and they're both fine. One has, she called him El Chai, the Lord lives, and El Roi, the Lord is my shepherd. And El Roi has a little cleft lip, and yesterday they did surgery on the cleft lip.
You've been listening to Sandy Shoshani talking about her work with Be-Ad Chaim in Israel, and we'll hear more from her on next week's programme. The Olive Tree Reconciliation Fund is a Christian charity based in the UK that supports the needs of both Jewish believers and Arab or Palestinian Christians living in Israel and the wider Middle East. If you'd like to know more about our work through our bi-monthly newsletter, including news about our upcoming tours, please either visit our website www.olivetreefund.org or write to me, Julia Fisher, OTRF, PO Box 402, Billingshurst, RH14 4BQ in the UK. Meanwhile, join me at the same time next week for another story from the Olive Tree. Until then, goodbye.